Hi, everyone. I'm going to come out with another video this week. And what I'm going to do basically is go over all my grammar analysis videos that I've done since 2018. And I want to put everything in one video that's really clear and concise. And I'm going to add chapter markers, probably one for the intro and one for each stanza, just to make it clear. I've been talking to Calazars and a couple of other people over the past few weeks and months. And I discussed the grammar. Just as I did in the past, I approached certain people. Like years ago, I approached Sean Dodson. I've approached Eric Johnson. I've approached quite a few people, and nobody really ever wanted to do a grammar analysis. So I think that it's important that you understand the poem, and I'm going to show you why. Now, my new grammar analysis is going to be different than the other ones because I'm going to only analyze the poem, and I'm going to tell you every single phrase, clause, and word that's in there, what it means, what part of speech it is, how it's working with the rest of the poem, and the context in which it's being used. I'm not going to do any of the operations. In other words, it's not going to involve any solution, including my own. I'm also not going to be sliding lines. I'm not going to put it in a grid. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm trying to do this in such a way that no matter where your solve is, you should be able to use this information in order to work out the answers to the clues. That's the way I want this to work. So I don't care where you're searching. I don't even care if it's in the right state. We're just going to focus on the poem. Okay. So I took some notes here and I'm going to basically, you could read them. They're on the screen, but I'm going to go ahead and read it with you and discuss it. I'm not going to get into the grammar in this video. That's going to be the next video. I'm still working on it, but it's going to be really good. It's going to be short. It's going to be concise. In the past, I talked many times about understanding the context in which the words and phrases are being used in Forrest Fenn's poem. Okay. You have to know the context in which they're being used. Otherwise, when you go to a dictionary, you're not going to have any idea what to look for because many words, as you probably know, can play the role of multiple speech parts. They could be nouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives. Some of them, could be more than one. Some of them could be used as an adverb, as a preposition. And in order to determine which one to use, you have to understand the context. Okay? Forrest Fenn took advantage of that in the poem. Without understanding how these grammar units interact with each other, you can't possibly know the meaning of the word. Also, he knew that if you put, let's call them trigger words or trigger phrases in there, that he'll play with your mind. In other words, the word treasure, the word secret, where warm water salt, canyon, brown, meat, gold, etc. By doing that, he made it such that the non-serious searcher, in other words, the casual reader, is just going to gloss over the poem and they're immediately going to jump to a map and look for places that they believe in their mind is synonymous with the clues. For example, you're going to jump to a map and say, Sinks Canyon is where warm water salt because it matches the description of where warm water salt because it halts at the sink and it comes out at the rise 2 miles later. Or you might say, it halts at Madison Junction because there's two geyser fed rivers and they halt and then you become the Madison. And, there's so many, there's millions of places that it could be. The problem is we want to know Forrest Fenn's place. And the only way you're going to do that is by properly understand the poem. People get gold fever and they want to jump the gun. And therefore it becomes a personal bias as millions of places seem to fit the clues. And then before you know it, your solve falls apart and you have no way to prove anything. You end up going to scrapbooks and reading the forums and reading Forrest Fenn's books and, everything but the poem. I don't know why everybody is so afraid of the poem. Forrest Fenn hinted, and you could go on Dal's YouTube channel. There's got to be at least 20 videos where he discusses grammar and how he liked to use it for effect. Okay. He talks about it even in his books where he mentions important literature. He's constantly mentioning other poems and Shakespeare and quoting T.S. Eliot. He's doing that for a reason. All of those were subtle hints that, hey, you really got to pay attention to the poem. Now, he knows that most people hate grammar. And also, most adults already forgot what they learned when they were in school. Maybe that's why he said kids should look at it, because it's still fresh in their head. And to make matters worse, as life goes on, you continue to misuse words, okay? You don't really know the meaning of them. Forrest Fenn mentioned the word tenacity in the book. And then in the video at Moby Dickens, he discusses looking up the word several. And then he asked people in the audience, and 100% of them got the meaning of the word wrong. Forrest is counting on the fact in this poem that unless you pick the correct meaning, in other words, if you know the context, there's going to be a meaning that's going to play out, that there's no doubt in your mind that is exactly what he means. Because properly reading the poem is not something subjective, okay? The solutions to the clues, yeah, those are going to be based on your opinion in the poem. But reading the poem is not a subjective thing. There's only one way to read it. And the way to read it is the way Forrest Fenn wrote it, okay? And I'm not talking about correcting his grammar. What I'm saying is that you have to read it using the grammar he used. And if you do discover something wrong, usually a poet or any writer is going to alter the grammar slightly, maybe to put emphasis on something or to draw attention to it. But the problem is, if you don't know proper grammar, you aren't going to be able to detect where he bent the rules in order to do exactly that, to draw emphasis to something that's important. You have to know how each of the phrases and clauses and everything work with each other. Okay. Just like we have parts of speech, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, those are individual words, but you got to remember that an entire phrase or a clause as one unit is going to operate either as an adjective or as an adverb, or sometimes the subject, even a single noun, is replaced by an entire clause. Okay. And if you don't understand how all that stuff works, you can't possibly figure anything out by looking up individual words. It just doesn't work. Not, because you don't know the context. And as I said, a lot of words can play multiple roles. And it's not really confusing if you know the rules. If you don't know the rules and you're just glossing over it, especially when it's a poem that leads to, a multi-million-dollar treasure chest, then your mind is going to play games. So one of the most important things, in my opinion, that Forrest Fenn told us was that imagination is more important than knowledge. Now, why would he say such a thing? Well, let's look at the definition of knowledge. Knowledge is a noun. Okay, the fact or state of knowing something for certain. That's knowledge. Now, if you want the verb form of knowledge, you have to change the spelling, because as a verb, it's spelled K-N-O-W. That's the verb form of knowledge. And the verb form means to perceive directly, grasp in the mind with clarity and certainty. Okay? So as you know, the word knowledge is not in the poem, but it is in the poem as a verb. And that verb is know. And it just so happens it's right where he tells you that he gives you the answers. In other words, he's providing knowledge, a noun, to make you wise. You're gaining wisdom through knowledge by experiencing the poem. And he tells you, I already know, meaning that the answers he gives you down in stanza 5 apply to the stuff we already know above. Okay? This really makes sense, and all of this stuff is hints. Now let's look at the definition of imagination. Imagination is the ability to form a mental images of things that are not present to the senses or not considered to be real. Now think about that for a minute. Not present, not real. It's kind of like when you're reading a book, or like Alice in Wonderland. Okay, the places described in there are labeled by the author. They don't really exist. So ask yourself this. When you read the poem, you're basically reading a story. And like many stories, the location mentioned are meant to be imagined. They do not exist in all cases. So, what if the places in the poem do not exist on any map until you determine their meaning by analyzing the poem and understanding the word usage and breaking everything down as I'm going to do in the next video? What if Forrest, like many other writers, simply gave places a label that only makes sense when you pair them with the information you will get when you arrive at the correct place and combine the clues with the information on site? That would be pretty cool, huh? Everybody knows that the poem is vague, but what happens if you correctly solve the clues and then when you go to the correct place to begin it, everything just fits into place? Okay. And you'll understand what the labels mean. They'll make sense, even though you're not going to find any place on a map named Homa Brown. And obviously, there's canyons all over the Rockies. And where warm water salt is very vague. You know, there's millions of places where warm water salt. We need the right one. If you don't have the right place, then everything is going to be wrong, and you might as well stay home and play canasta. That's why Forrest Fenn indicated that so many times. Yeah, here's an example of that. A writer might say, around the corner from Wimpy's Hamburgers, dot, dot, dot. In other words, that's just a pause or a phrase from within their writing. So, because this is a treasure map, you know, everybody's going to go on a map and say, the Wimpy's Hamburger. Oh, there's a place up by the Tetons, Wimpy's Knob. Maybe that's no, that's not the way it works. Okay. Right now, just consider it as a label in the poem. You know, what if that place is only in the poem, like I said, until you locate where to begin, prior to going around the corner? In other words, Wimpy's Hamburgers can't be found unless you're standing at the right place before you go around the corner. There's no shortcuts. There's only one way to do this. And at first, he's telling you to use your imagination, which is exactly what you do when you're reading a novel. The same holds true, like I said, where Walmart Salt Canyon, not far, but too far to walk, Homa Brown, no place for the meat, etc. They are at first nothing but labels on their own, and they're meant to lead you through the story. Okay, if they didn't mention Wimpy's Hamburgers in the story, they wouldn't be able to refer back to it later. You wouldn't understand what they're talking about, right? So they're going to let you know these things up ahead of time. And in your imagination, you're going to start to draw a picture of a block with a hamburger joint on it. And right around the corner is where you're standing. All right. But that's not going to make sense yet. And Forrest Fenn hinted many times in many ways that it's going to be difficult to solve the first clue. If you don't have the first clue, you have nothing. And he also said, T.S. Eliot, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started. In other words, where we began it, and know the place, meaning that place where we begin, for the first time. Why do you think Forrest Fenn would quote T.S. Eliot like that? You know, how does that quote relate as a hint to the poem structure? Let's look at a couple things, and there's a link up there. All of this is from Mysterious Writings. Back in 2014, someone asked Forrest, someone unfamiliar with your poem receives a message that says, quote, meet me where warm water salt, comma, somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe, end quote. Would they be able to work out where to go? In other words, would they know where to meet me? If they can't, would they need the whole poem, just another stanza, another line, or a word to help them on their way? Phil Bayman. Answer. There are a few words in the poem that are not useful in finding the treasure, Phil, but it's risky to discount any of them. You oversimplify the clues. There are many places in the Rocky Mountains where warm water salt, and nearly all of them are north of Santa Fe. Look at the big picture. There are no shortcuts. So he's telling you right there that just where warm water salt and north of Santa Fe in the Rockies is not enough information to determine where warm water salt. So if the first thing you're doing in your solve is going to a map and finding the sink or Madison Junction or Wedding of the Waters or Taos Peak or anywhere, okay, you're doing it wrong, right? We have to know where warm water salt is going to be a precise location, because a treasure map is obviously going to lead you to the treasure, but if you solve the clues. But if I just handed you a random map and I said, okay, go to the treasure, you can't possibly come up with directions unless you know where you're starting. I've said this before. If you want to know how to get to Disney World in Florida, I can't give you directions unless I know, are you coming from New York? Are you coming from California? Are you coming from Wyoming? The directions are going to be all different. Okay. So Forrest Fenn complicated by giving you a starting point that's so vague. It could be anywhere within the 4 states. Obviously, now we know that the treasure was found in Wyoming, but still, just in Wyoming alone, there's millions of places. Now, I want you to take note also that this means that if the geography at your where warm water salt does not exist in at least one place within the Rocky Mountains below the northern border of Santa Fe, New Mexico, then your solve is wrong. There are no rivers fed by active geysers anywhere in New Mexico. So anything geyser related, for example, is wrong. That clearly rules out Madison Junction, because no such place exists in New Mexico anywhere. However, just so I don't, seem to be bashing you guys in looking in Yellowstone, the same is not true for a river that forms at a hot spring. It's got to be more than one spring, though, because he says waters, plural, where warm water is salt. There are certainly headwaters that form at hot springs in New Mexico. Matter of fact, I think the closest one to Forest is actually on the southeast edge of the Rocky Mountains in New Mexico. There's creeks and rivers that form up there, and then of course all rivers and creeks go down in elevation. They all go down, and they all usually carve a canyon. Like I said, the clues are all vague. But by looking at this hint, you can see clearly that your geography is going to have to match when you actually get to your final solve. This, of course, has nothing to do with solving the poem. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that Forrest Fenn is stating that just knowing the words where warm water salt and that it's somewhere north of Santa Fe is not enough to work out the precise location. You cannot figure out where warm water salt with just the words warm water salt, and you need the whole poem, basically. He's telling you not to rule anything out right there in plain English. Here's another one, same place, 2014. Dear Forrest, you tell us that we should find where warm water salt before trying to solve any other clues. Keep in mind, read that again. Say and solve where warm water salt before trying to solve any of the other clues. That's not what Forrest Fenn said, first of all. Forrest Fenn said that you have to know where warm water salt. He didn't say that you have to solve it right there on that line. Okay. What he did say is that you shouldn't take the clues out of order. Okay. But what he is telling you is just the words warm water salt alone and North Santa Fe is not enough. So she says here, you tell us that we should find where warm water salt before trying to solve any of the other clues, imagining that we haven't seen the rest of the poem. And all we have to go on is beginning where warm water salt, then somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe. Do you think that we can confidently determine the starting place for your treasure trail? Steve. Answer from Forrest. No. Forrest Fenn is saying no. If all you have to go on are those 2 clues, you cannot proceed with confidence. Look at it this way. If you're making a cake and you left out a few ingredients, would you achieve your goal? Obviously, if you're going to bake a cake, if you don't have all of the ingredients ahead of time, there's no way you're going to make that cake. You have to have all the ingredients worked out before you start. That's basically what he's telling you. And then he adds here, and this is a hint to something completely different, but I'll show it to you anyway. Your question reminds me of another. You leave home and you walk a straight line for a mile. You turn 90 degrees left, walk a curved line for a mile, and shoot a bear. Then you turn 90 degrees left again and walk a straight line back to your home. What color was the bear? When he says curved lines, he's talking about a triangle. Imagine a triangle, okay? Because he makes only three turns here, and he ends up back where he started. I'm sorry, two turns. He walks, makes a left, walks, make a left, and then he ends up back home again after some more walk. Usually, you need to make three turns if you're going around a rectangle, right? So he's talking about a triangle. And the reason why I said the lines are curved is imagine a rectangle that's laying flat on the surface of the earth. You could be in California, walk a straight line over to the East Coast, and then make a left, and then walk a straight line to the North Pole, make another left, and walk a straight line down to California. There you go. That describes what he's talking about here. So that's a hint to something other than the poem. So I don't want to get into that here. I'm just discussing the poem. So he's telling you again here, you can't locate where warm water salt without using the clues in the poem. So any solve that jumps to a map looking for where warm water salt without first solving the poem to give confidence is going to be wrong. He's once again hinting that you need to solve the whole poem before knowing where to begin when boots on the ground. Here's a third one. I'm just going to throw it in there, heck of it. This one was actually asked by Cal Lazars, who went by the handle MDC777 on Chase Chat. So in 2014, Mike asked Forrest, is the map that needs to be used to discover where warm water salt found online or in paper form, or both? Forrest Fenn responds, come on now, Agent 777. A map is a map. The more detailed maps are the most useful if you have the right map. But I'm not sure I need to tell you that, F. My note. You will not know what the right map is until you solve the poem. Okay. Notice all this stuff is all in the same block, all of the same stuff from 2014. He's reiterating over and over and over and over the same point. So the bottom line is Forrest Fenn constantly, maybe even hundreds, if not 1,000 times, told us that you must know where to begin. If you do not have warm water salt nailed down, you're going to have a very nice vacation. You may as well stay home and play canasta. Once again, we also know for a fact that warm water salt plus north of Santa Fe is not good enough to locate where warm water salt. You need the rest of the poem just to learn where to start. This should all be obvious to you by now. So here's one final hint. This again reinforces the fact that you need to solve the poem first in order to figure out where to start. Again, think about T.S. Eliot, all the stuff I previously mentioned, arriving where we started, knowing it for the first time. Forrest Fenn said, those who solve the first clue are more than halfway to the treasure, metaphorically speaking. Now, we already know the first clue is begin at where warm water salt, ... right? He said that, all right? So that's the first clue. It's not the beginning of the poem, but it's the first clue. And as you'll find out later, ignoring the first stanza is a major mistake because you're not going to know what to begin. You're not going to know what it is that you are to begin. And it's not as simple as the chase. You have to understand the poem. You can't discount anything. Jumping right to begin it where warm water salt and pulling out a map is not the way to solve this thing. Okay? That is a fact. We also now know that solving where warm water salt means you're more than halfway to the treasure, metaphorically speaking. So to me, once again, this proves that there are two phases to the solution. Phase one, solve the entire poem with no maps, just the poem. Only use your imagination. Visualize what the poem is telling you to do and follow it step by step in order to solve where warm water salt. That's phase one. Okay. Phase two, now that you solve where warm water salt, you're already more than halfway there because you solved clue number one. You only got 8 clues left. That's more than halfway because you've discovered and you're confident where warm water salt is because you used the poem to figure it out. As Forrest said, you can't just use where warm waters halt and a map to solve itself. You need the rest of the poem. This is a fact. This is not me guessing. It's not an interpretation. It's a fact. Okay. And it makes sense. When you look at the thrill of the chase, the very last thing in that book are the two omegas. Now, an omega means end of series. Okay. So two omegas means you have reached the end of the story or the poem twice. And that's why I'm saying that the first pass is to solve where warm waters halt. Now that you know where to begin, like T.S. Eliot said, you're going to arrive there for the first time and you're going to go over the poem again. This time, the clues are going to refer to physical locations relative to the place that you're on. So that's your boots on the ground now. Boots on the ground are going to take you from your known where warm waters halt directly to the chest. Now, I'm joking here. Now, what if your place is the end? Oh, I won't go there in this video. But you can see our solve if you want to know what I'm talking about. End of series, end, cease, halt, all the omega, all that stuff has to do with our blaze in the poem in phase one. It's the end twice, vertically and horizontally. The end. Okay, that's a blaze in the poem. But like I said, I don't want to get that here, and I'm not going to get into that when I review the poem either. I'm not even going to slide the lines. I'm not going to reveal the secret message. I've already done that. What I'm going to do is just do the poem, and you'll see how everything works, right? So the definition of metaphor before we move on, because he said metaphorically speaking, the definition of metaphor is one thing conceived as representing another, a symbol, a figure of speech in which the word or phrase that ordinarily designates one thing is used to designate another or something else, thus making an implicit comparison, as in A Sea of Troubles or All the World's a Stage in Shakespeare. It's funny how Forrest Fenn mentioned Shakespeare in The Thrill of the Chase. Could that be a subtle hint? Yeah, well, it certainly can be. With that quote alone, with Shakespeare and with the T.S. Eliot quote, you should really get it in your head now that the poem is a two-phase solution. You need to use the poem once to solve for where warm waters halt. Then, when you go to that spot, the clues are going to magically fall into place. Now, I don't mean that when you go there, you're going to find a place named Canyon Down or something that's going to be, named anything with Meek, like Joe Meek, or, you're not going to find like Sinks Canyon being the canyon and warm waters halting at the sink and the rise. That's not what I mean. That's not how it's going to work. What's going to happen is you're going to go there and you're going to find the right map. And you're going to use that map and then follow the clues. And his clues are not going to be one-to-one. In other words, they're not going to be directly named on the map because that would be too easy. If he named like Five Springs Creek or Five Springs Falls or Five Springs Canyon or Five Springs, or Madison Creek, any of them, then it's obviously not something that you'd have to solve. And it's also not subtle. So he doesn't name anything directly. So you're not going to find anybody named Brown. And I just want to let you guys know something up front. When you guys are looking at capitalization rules, you're correct that a proper noun is always capital. But I'm just going to throw you another bone here. Also, a proper adjective is capitalized. Go look up proper adjective on your own time. I'm not going to teach you grammar and teach you how to do things. Matter of fact, in my next video, when I go over the grammar analysis, I'm not going to attempt to teach you any grammar. I'm only going to go over the grammar as I read it in the poem, and I'm going to point out anything that he may have bent the rules, okay? I'm going to break everything down into phrases and clauses. I'm not going to sit there and teach you what the parts of speech are, how they all interact. I may give you a short summary, like, because I'm assuming that you guys know what a noun is, and an adjective, and an adverb, and a pronoun, and a preposition. There's 8 or 9 parts of speech, and you have to really know them. But it's not that simple because a noun is not always used as a noun. You could take a noun phrase and it behaves as an adverb or an adjective. That gets into understanding how subordinating conjunctions work and how conjunctions work and how things are tied together, how phrases connect. That's the important part. And I believe that Forrest Fenn loved grammar. He loved playing with people and teasing grammar folks, because a lot of them think they know it all and they don't really know it all either. It's kind of funny because Eric Johnson, for example, I wanted him to work on this because he's an English major. And he told me that at this point, especially considering I spent almost 5 years on the poem, just doing the grammar analysis, I've approached college professors at Princeton and Rutgers. I've approached countless grammar experts on the internet that have large followings. I didn't just go to any YouTube channel because there's thousands of them. And scaringly enough, many of them, especially the ones done by people in other countries, such as India, who don't really speak proper English. I understand why they're doing it and not putting them down. They're trying to teach other people how to speak English natively. But be very careful because they got a lot of mistakes in their videos. And if somebody's coming here from another country, it's not going to be a big deal. But with Forrest Fenn, it's a big deal if you don't follow his grammar exactly as he wrote it. So keep that in mind if you're going to look anything up. There's a website on YouTube called our YouTube channel called Ingvid, ENGVID. They got some really good speakers and they do a very good job teaching English. And in this video, I'll probably put a link to a couple of them that I think are really good. And if you're really interested in this stuff, you might want to go and learn it because forget about Forrest Fenn's poem right now. But when you go through this stuff and bring it back fresh into your head, when you're reading a novel or anything, it really opens your eyes and makes you see things that you don't normally see. It's amazing what you could do with this language. The other funny thing is when I told you before that I dropped out of high school. I dropped out in senior year. I ended up going back and getting a GED about a year later, but I dropped out. And it's interesting because I dropped out in English class. I used to sit way in the back like Forrest with Mrs. Ford, and I would just sleep. I don't, and it wasn't that I didn't have an interest. So frankly, my teachers were not all that great at making stuff interesting. My math teacher wasn't good. My English teacher wasn't good. My social studies teacher and my homeroom teacher were pretty good at it, but my English teacher wasn't really good. She was like appeared stiff, and she would go over rules, and she wouldn't show you how those rules are used and how you can bend them and how you could use them to emphasize things when you're writing. They're English teachers. They're not grammarians. They're not linguists. They don't really fully understand it themselves in many cases. But it's amazing what you can do. And all of the references that Forrest Fenn made to Alice in Wonderland and Shakespeare, there's something in common with those authors that he mentioned. And if you know about those authors and you study them, again, this is way out there, you can see that Forrest does some of the same things they do. And he does it too to draw attention to things. Probably himself, to be honest with you, like he did, with his example about tenacity and the example on Dallas where he abuses all kinds of words. He does that on purpose. And he's actually amazed that how many times he puts mistakes in his books and people, even grammar experts, would look at it and they don't mention it. It's funny stuff. And anybody that says he didn't like grammar, he didn't like the rules, you're wrong. I think he liked it and he liked using it to effect. And besides that, he was obviously a damn good salesman. He knew that people liked to have things they couldn't afford. You're not going to go and buy a multi-million-dollar painting, but if you knowingly buy something for $100 or $1,000 and you know it's a copy, most people are going to see that copy hanging on your wall. They're not going to know it's a copy. So it's already achieved its goal for the person that bought it. They want to have it because they like it. They're not necessarily buying it as an investment. So there's a market in that. And it's not just with art. There's a market all over the place, where people will buy something that is, there's different levels of it or different tiers. You can buy the expert one for $1 million. You could buy, something somewhere in the middle for $100,000, and then you could buy something for 100 or even 1,000 at the low end. You know you're not buying the original, but it doesn't matter. Okay, it's not who you are. It's who they think you are. That's a perfect thing to use to end this video right now. But anyway, I'm going to do this video over the next couple of days, and I think you're going to enjoy it because it's not going to discuss any solve, including my own. I'm only going to go through the grammar, and I'm not going to show you how to use that grammar in order to solve the clues. I'm not going to slide the lines. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm just going to show you how to understand the poem. But trust me on this. If you really pay attention to what I show you, I'm not even going to have to give you the solve. All of a sudden, you're going to see the poem in a completely new light. And speaking of Jack actually mentioned, he said in one of the Q&As that he did, I don't want to say that the poem was meant for someone with a master's degree in grammar, but really thoroughly understanding the poem is of utmost importance. So I think that Jack's seen some of the analysis that I was doing, but Jack is a writer. Remember that. So Jack is already a step above me. Jack probably knew English better than me, right? So he was able to figure out or see the ending of the poem before I was. Or maybe the analysis helped him solve it someplace else and my solve is wrong. Either way, this grammar analysis that I'm going to show you, and again, you can already find it, but you're going to have to look at like 30 videos that I did. I'm going to put it all in one video. It's probably going to be an hour, maybe hour and a half, 2 hours long, but I'm going to break it up into chapters to make it easier for you to navigate. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. And now you know why I do the grammar videos. And I really, again, I'm going to leave some links below to some helpful sites and go with it. If you have no interest in any of this stuff and no interest in grammar, I'm going to tell you now that you may as well not have any interest in the poem because you're never going to find a solution if you don't understand the poem. Peace.